Thank you. Thank you all for coming here in that post-lunch slump. We will hope to wake you up. Sanam will join us in a second. But this talk, although it sounds not as exciting as it will be, Creative Synergies in Education, is essentially about how there can be better partnerships between the UK and India when it comes to education. And actually, genuinely, this is a really exciting time for that, off the back of a UK-India trade agreement, which has taken quite a while to come to fruition. There is a real opportunity. People often talk about people-to-people contacts between the UK and India, but education is one that is so topical. So that's what we're going to explore through the course of the next hour. We will open it up towards the end for questions as well. But really, I guess the first question for the panel is about how education ties can be closer between the two. I should say, before we start, that this panel is brought to you by the University of York, of which we have two representatives from. I went to the University of York, which is a happy coincidence as well, and I've spent many years in the past living in India. So yeah, we're going to be exploring the connections between the UK and India when it comes to education. And let's start with Joan Concannon, the Director of External Relations from the University of York, because actually, Joan, in the past, we often, when we talked about trade deals, trying to get over the line, it was one of the sticking points was student visas for people coming from India here to the UK. But what you're doing at the University of York is exciting because you're one of a number of universities who's trying to set up in India so that people won't necessarily have to leave or want to leave.
Well, I think, first of all, it's really great to see so many people here, and thank you. For anyone who doesn't know, the University of York is a relatively new university in a very old city. So the city is about 2,000 years old. The university was created in 1963 as part of a new wave of widening access to higher education. And that is really firmly embedded in our principles, that idea of providing access to people of talent who would otherwise not get their full potential. And I think the really interesting opportunity now that we see is the opportunity through the new education policy and the shift in Indian government policy to recognise that the sheer scale of demand for higher education in India, with a really, really significant rise of one of the most vibrant economies already in the world, having about 20 million places that they want to have for the demand of higher education. By 2030, I've seen reports that would suggest if India was to keep pace with that demand, it would need 1,500 additional higher education institutions. That is clearly an enormous infrastructure issue. And so the change recently in law is about enabling further collaborations with higher education institutions overseas who have had perhaps bilateral research or teaching collaborations with Indian institutions for many years, as indeed is the case with the University of York, particularly actually in our research, particularly around medical technologies, the safety assurance of autonomous systems and robotics, the bioeconomy, engineering, biology, and so on. I think the opportunity, therefore, is to be much more multi-layered in how we think about education as an enabler to tackle global problems. So we are, and I should absolutely make clear, a very welcoming haven for students from all over the world, including India. And we would wish to remain that way because we firmly believe in a globalized education system. If you think about employers' needs, it is often not the technical skills that they talk about, but the softer skills of being able to work in multicultural environments. And we are passionate believers in education as being the glue that enables people to work better together. We live in an extremely polarized world, but we also see this opportunity building on our spirit of access to education from the very inception of the university to take advantage of the change in the Indian government's regulatory environment to also use that opportunity to create a campus in Mumbai, as it turns out. And not 2 hours ago, my Vice-Chancellor, who was originally going to be here today, but was summoned by the Maharashtra state government to receive in person the letter of intent that says we now have the permission to create a campus in Mumbai. And we're incredibly excited about that.
That's very exciting, isn't it? Congratulations.
So Charlie, our VC, sent me a WhatsApp about half an hour ago, very excited that this enormous ceremony has taken place in Mumbai earlier on today under the banner of Mumbai Rising, with the entire focus of the event shaped around the enormous potential for really deep sustainable relationships spanning research and teaching to allow that access to higher education, because the economic priorities, the challenges and the opportunities to use education to create solutions and to deliver a more equitable environment are absolutely enormous.
And Joan, can I just jump in?
Really proud to be part of that.
What exactly is this going to be then? It's going to be a University of York campus in the city of Mumbai.
Yes, it is. So effectively, we're working with a number of Indian partners, because you cannot rock up pretending that you know everything. We absolutely do not. What we are doing is essentially developing and delivering a curriculum that is precisely equivalent to the curriculum that we deliver in York. So anyone who is graduating from the University of York in Mumbai will be graduating with a University of York degree. Now, if I give you an indication of the quality of the university's offer, I will use what we tend to regard, so I won't use the educational jargon, but there are two measures in the UK higher education system that measure the impact and quality of what you do. Teaching, very obviously, and research. We are one of 4 institutions in this country that have a gold in teaching and a top 10 ranking in the quality and impact of our research. The other 3 are those slightly well-known institutions, Oxford, Cambridge, and Imperial. I know. So we're way better. So the quality of what we do is, in effect, what we want to translate into an Indian environment. And so the choices that we make in terms of the first wave of our curriculum are shaped and developed and co-curated with Indian employers, with Maharashtra state government, thinking about that future workforce plan to really deliver high quality education, but to make it accessible to people who would not necessarily have the wherewithal to come overseas. And that's really important for us, that accessibility point, but it is also a quality point, and it is comprehensive. We are not just doing a transnational education model, as they are called, flying faculty overseas for blocks of time and then coming back again in a very old-fashioned model. We are setting up a campus that is using our research capabilities to build research alliances in Mumbai, shaped around Mumbai's needs, shaped around the skills needs, shaped around the opportunities to use our research to forge collaborations across areas of expertise that we have and areas of expertise that various Indian institutes are working with us already on.
Okay, I'm just going to jump in there, Joan, if I may, just to let Sanam take to the stage. Welcome, Sanam.
I am very relieved.
And we can, I'll let you catch your breath. So I'm going to ask Sanjoy a question while Sanam settles in. Joan touched on there some of the changes that have opened up. We know over decades India's economy has opened up more, but how it's opening up in education. How significant is that then?
Just look at the numbers. Because of my long hair, I also sit on a number of organizations. And one of the things that I do is I work with street children. And when we did a survey about maybe 10 or 12 years ago, we realized that it would take 20 years to build educational institutions to be able to cater to the number of kids who would, at that point of time, be eligible for education. And it would also then take 24 years to be able to train teachers, professors, and all of the ecosystem that you need to be part of an education system. Today, given what's happening in the United States, because, in our time, or in our parents' time certainly, it was de rigueur to come to Oxford or Cambridge or Imperial or King's or SOAS or wherever it is that you went. I bucked the trend. My brother came here. I chose to stay on in India and do theater instead. But the next generations all went off to the United States because that was the land of honey and gold. Now, given what's happening in the United States, parents and younger people are choosing to relook at where they're going to study, with Canada, Australia, and back to UK becoming the foundation spaces. So the opportunity today is huge, it's vast. And with institutions like the University of York setting up shop in places like Maharashtra, as opposed to, say, Gift City in Ahmedabad, where you don't have any booze, so, which is, of course, a much needed factor for any university to have. I think this is huge, and you will see that you'll need to grow fairly rapidly because for every university seat today in India, you have 116 applicants at any given point of time.
Wow, thanks, Sanjoy. That's really interesting and useful context. And I was looking at some of the figures. India has the largest and most complex education system in the world. Some 43.3 million higher education students. And that's just the ones that get places, as you say. Sanam, let's bring you into the discussion. Welcome. I'm glad you made it. And sorry you had some transport issues. One of the things that Sanjoy touched on, which I can definitely relate to, my cousins, my friends, the ambitious Indians I know would always want to travel abroad. There was a kind of badge of honour that was associated with it. How do you overcome that and encourage the brightest, most talented Indians to study at campuses like the new one that's going to be set up by the University of York?
Thank you, and with apologies. It's been like World War III getting here today, but I am here and very glad. Thank you very much for having me. I think, look, I am super excited that York's going to, I'm a Delhi girl, by the way, Joan, but going to Mumbai, best city, like really, really good place. Why? Because also, look, we have 20 million Indian students that need great education. We are extremely talented. We are extremely ambitious, as you said, Rajini. We need 14 new universities a week in order to meet our gross enrollment
14
ratios.
a week?
1 for a week.
Wow, that's
in order to
staggering,
meet
isn't
our
it?
targets.
Yeah.
And so, as a country, and that's why the new education policy is so forward-looking, so welcoming, and we really welcome it. It's because we need capacity to be built within the country, and we need to bring the best of both worlds together. And for centuries, we've had everyone from Mahatma Gandhi, who's heard of him, to Nehru, to so many prime ministers come over here to study. We have a legacy, but I think what we now have is an opportunity that legacy that's been affordable only to a few because it's £1 to 115 INR as it stands, or to only sometimes it can be only the rich and the richest get access because of that affordability, although that's starting to change. This enables students en masse in the country to be able to access that education, depending on where you set your prices at, which of course, even if it were comparable prices, assuming that it's comparable services that we're providing, I think the fact that there are no living expenses in the same way as they would for students who would have had to travel, there won't be any significant education loans to take out. I think this will really solve for that problem of equitable access that we do have in India. I mean, it's harder to get into an IIT and IIM than it is into Harvard, and that's statistically correct. So I think this will really help us in really building that capacity, both from a teaching and an infrastructural perspective, but also from bringing, if as an Indian I can afford foreign education and I can afford with my purchasing power the best that the world's educators have to offer, I think it's brilliant that we're bringing them into town.
I'm going to pick up on something you said, Sanam. And one of the things that attracts people to study overseas isn't just the name of the institution, it's also the recognition of the qualification. For example, my mum, who's in the audience here, studied medicine in India, but didn't ever practice here because she would have had to do a requalification.
Lab, yeah.
And that's exactly a frustration for so many people. It's continued to be a frustration. Now there's this mutual recognition of qualification, the MRQ. It's technical, but it effectively means they're trying to make it easier so that qualifications that are earned in India can be internationally recognized. Tell us about that and how significant that could be in terms of changing that shift as well.
Yeah, I think it's really significant. Organizations like the British Council worked exceptionally hard alongside the Indian counterparts, AIU and others, to make this happen for many years. It came through a year or so ago. And what it really means is, as you said, Rajini, that entire credit transfer system, the recognition back in India is far more easier now if you've had an international qualification, such as a degree from the UK. What it specifically enables is a lot of Indian students have the dream of Indian civil service. We, especially some of the most talented best and brightest students, whereas previously government recognition wasn't enabled for international degrees. It would have required an Indian qualification. That now is covered, for instance, through the MRQ. I think through other agreements that have happened recently, for instance, the Indian Bar Associations announced, sort of equivalence as well and recognition that makes it far simpler. So there is so much more movement in alignment between both countries, the education systems, and we do build on a foundational legacy that's quite similar, but really aligning it now at that sort of credit transfer level. We also have things like, really cool things like digital credit vaults in India now, which are making not just the conceptual framework easy, but also the actual implementation technically quite easy. So yeah, I think it's great, and the momentum is very much in the right direction. I think we just need to scale it really fast because we have millions of hungry, ambitious, talented, aspirational kids that we need to serve.
Of course, because India is the most populous country in the world, as everyone in this room will know, with more than 2/3 of the country young people. So there's huge potential. Heather, let's bring you into this discussion. What do you think universities like York and UK institutions can give to the Indian education system, and what can the Indian education system give to UK institutions? Because it's a two-way transfer. I think historically it's always been that, only India can learn from the UK, but of course that conversation's changing so much now, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me. So I'm from the creative background. I'm from an industry background, work in the creative industries for a couple of decades now, and for me, some of the work the University of York's doing around the creative industries, we've got a few different programmes, XR Stories, where we're looking at interactive and immersive media. That's a big sort of project that's been running now for a number of years, where we're looking at those bridges between film and games and TV, interactive media, and how those things work together. So perhaps something that we can bring is that sort of transmedia crossover between those different, which would have traditionally been siloed industries, and how you can work with them together collectively, collaborate across those different industry areas, and create a language which translates across all of those things. Because I know the audiences are changing, their needs are changing. You don't just watch Harry Potter the film now, you also take part in the immersive game, the VR experience, you buy the merch. So there might be something around those research areas where we're crossing across those creative industry areas. Things like AI, for example. Again, we're working with industry in York. We have a company called Viridian FX who lives in the city. They do the special effects for Game of Thrones, and they're based in York. They're doing some really interesting stuff around AI. So what they're using AI technologies and gaming technologies to really speed up the pipeline of the process of production, post-production, and they're using those technologies to speed up the process, to reduce the costs involved, and to create some really exceptional work. So that might be something again that we could bring to our Mumbai campus, where they have co-created with us an MA in special effects, which we are launching next year. So something like that, again, might be of interest. In terms of the Indian students, I mean, such amazing sort of entrepreneurialism and diversity and creativity. I'm really looking forward to working with the Indian students. They're bringing this entrepreneurial spirit, which is really exciting, and how we can work with them in terms of industry readiness, and sort of turning that creativity into commercial sort of endeavours, helping them to maybe we're running a BCI course, the Business of the Creative Industries. So looking at how you kind of translate that creative spirit into craft that has an invoice attached. Because often in the creative industries, you've got micro businesses and freelancers who often, struggle to make money from the work that they're really passionate about. So it's looking at how do you translate that creative spirit into something that you can make a living from. So hopefully between us, we could come up with some really good ideas.
Some really interesting projects, and you're absolutely right. I've never lived anywhere that's been more entrepreneurial than India. Everywhere you go, every sector of society. Joan, there's clearly a need and a demand. How quickly can you get this campus off the ground, and how quickly can you scale up, as Sanam was saying, is desperately needed?
So the quickness, as of today, I can say we will be enrolling students for the 26-27 academic year. We are not building a bricks and mortar campus at this moment in time. What we're doing is essentially working with local partners to create spaces in the centre of Mumbai. We will probably move to a new development that is a mixed model of education, research, various institutes, but that's going to take some time. But we're hitting the ground running. So in effect, we are open for business pretty much from now. I've got some brochures I can hand out to anyone who's interested to find out more. So the opportunity then is to scale up. So we're launching something in the region of about 10 programs, again, shaped very much on the initial identification of things that we think are most popular in terms of teaching programs across the realm of business and creative industries and my brain, and bioscience and agri-food. And that's been very much in collaboration with the partners that we're working with in Mumbai. There's a lot of labour market data to show what will really fly in the first instance. But at the same time, and this is the really critical piece for me, that maps onto the way that we think about education provision in the University of York, is we will also be developing out the research teams, and we are hiring people who will be teaching and researching and building those collaborative relationships with the Indian institutes along the lines of the creative industries, medical technologies, engineering, biology. So that full throttle spectrum of the research and the teaching feeding off each other is a really big York thing. We are a university that have very few professors who do not teach at the home campus. We would expect a very similar model of research infusing the teaching in the Mumbai campus as well. And then we will scale at the point where, we can meet the demand and we are popular enough to attract and lucky enough to attract amazing students.
Will there be Indian lecturers and professors then, or are you bringing people over from York in the first instance?
Thanks to the letter of intent that got handed over a couple of hours ago, we will be launching a big recruitment campaign. And that recruitment campaign isn't about transplanting York academics, although we certainly encourage our academics to think about staff exchange programs. This will be a fully functioning academic staff base and professional staff base that will be run by a provost in the campus. They will be part of the York academic community, but this isn't about transplanting for short periods of time. This is about creating from the ground up an academic community that will be tailored and delivering a brilliant educational experience for students in Mumbai from all over India.
One more question for you, and I will bring the rest of the panel in. Are you going to be encouraging British students or American students to go the other way?
Absolutely. I mean, I have been lucky enough to go to India on 3 occasions. I think it is the most mind-blowingly brilliant place I have ever been, and I can't wait to go back again. So, part of my team is a Global Opportunities team who foster all of our student mobility programs in and outbound. And we have already run international study centres with partners in various parts of India. I really want to scale that up and give students who are based in York the opportunity to go and experience for themselves such a vibrant place with so much talent and so much entrepreneurialism. We can learn so much. And we were talking in the green room earlier, one of the big things for me that is so admirable about the Indian education system is the way that they embed employer engagement into the curriculum at scale. We are really working on that in York, and we're learning so much from our India partners about how to do that in a way that's really engaging and valuable for students and gives them that added value.
Thank you very much. That's really useful and interesting, especially to know that you're hoping to open to registrations in the next year or so. That's pretty incredible, isn't it? Sanam, I'm just going to ask you about what Joan just touched on there, because certainly growing up in the UK, we heard about French exchanges, German exchanges, and I would love to have done an Indian exchange, but it just wasn't a thing. So again, just touching on what Joan said, how much do you think there's a potential now for not just British Indians, but anyone who's British or foreign to go the other direction? That's a conversation that we're seeing more. When I lived in India, there were more Brits who were going to their homeland again because they saw the potential and they saw that there was so much growth in such a huge country with so much potential.
I think it's quite critical that we enable young Brits to go to India and we enable that at scale. It's something that we've been talking about for a while because you know, if I put my Indian hat on, I've got 140,000 Indian students coming over every year, and that's been going on for centuries. So India has inbuilt, and then they go back, with the knowledge of how to deal with Britain. I'm sorry, but when I put my UK hat on, I cannot say the same thing. I cannot draw the same conclusion that do young Brits get India? I don't think they do. Unfortunately, we're not teaching the sort of history that might help them at the A level or at the GCSE level that they may need. That's a wholly separate conversation we can get into separately. But the point being that, you know, you mentioned Indian entrepreneurialism, innovation, jugaad. It is something that's embedded in our DNA. It is something, and I don't think that we have that in quite the same way here. And we're not embedding entrepreneurialism in the same way into young people here. But if they were to go to India, if they were to meet the Mumbai Dabbawalas, and I hope that's a case study that you do introduce through York, they will see the just absolutely crazy impact that can have on your neurodiversity, on your perspective, on your way of engaging with India and the world. If I am to sign a free trade agreement, which, yay, we have now done, but if I'm a young Brit thinking about what are my opportunities as a result of this free trade agreement, I think Brits need to do a lot more to enable young Brits to go to India and figure out for themselves what those opportunities are. We even have the Turing program, which is not quite taken up in the same way, where funding is available. Government funding is available for for any British student to go to India, experience India, to go to any country. I think India needs to, and this is not maybe it's not a JLF appropriate word, but I'll say it anyway. It's to sexify itself in terms of marketing and PR and branding, in terms of come to India. You know, we are incredible India, but I think we need to Gen Z that message a bit more. And you know, we've had fantastic people like Amitabh Kant do incredible campaigns for Kerala, for example, that have really transformed tourism in Kerala. I think we need to scale that up from an Indian side in terms of our PR, which will encourage young people to choose to go to India. But I think we need to push influencers in British institutions, need to push young people in Britain and encourage them and make them understand the way a lot of young people went to China from Britain many years ago. We need to inculcate that at scale to be able to take the opportunity that both democracies are offering now in that sense.
And I think that's part of the reason that, and Sanam and I talk about this a lot, the absolute critical importance of welcoming international students to the UK. We can be, shall we say, a little isolationist. And I think the more that UK students are engaging and are making friends with people from all over the world, it is just critical to opening up their minds to the possibilities of engaging in a different way. We have, as Sanam has said, now finally signed a trade deal between the UK and India. If we're going to make the most of that, the more that UK students can engage with Indian students, make friends with them, live with them, study with them, play with them, the opportunities for forging those kind of brilliant global connections will be so much better. We will all be better off the more that we mix with other people. So that opportunity to resist the sort of really unhelpful narrative sometimes about international students coming to the UK is something that I feel absolutely passionate about, and I'm up to my elbows in resisting some of the narratives that have emerged, and we've worked a lot on that.
Sanjoy.
I think there's no argument about international students traveling to any country to enrich themselves and enrich the educational institutions that they're going to be studying in. Even in a simple thing like the Jaipur Literature Festival or JLFs, we get in students not just from York and LSE, etc., but Missouri and NYU and so on and so forth, to the extent we now have quota systems given to countries because we don't want to be overwhelmed. However, the issue stays the same. We don't have capacity. I don't think any student internationally will be able to get into an Indian institution at this point of time, given that you have to get 101% out of 100% to get into an institution. Certainly at St. Stephen's College, which I'm from, I was looking at the admission pass percentage. It was 98.9%, and in economics it was 99.7% that you had to get to.
What did you get, Sanjoy?
I didn't get collectively over my years. I don't think I got that kind of mark. So I think that's one of the big challenges, because there isn't enough capacity. So what do places like York and Bombay or NYU in Abu Dhabi or all of these educational institutions finding other spaces? And going back to what Sanam said, so what's the price point? What's the entry point, and who is this going to be for, and therefore, what is it that we're going to do for the education system? Do remember when education came to India through the Cambridge mission, it was a single point agenda. Make sure that we educate Indians so that they understand our mindset, we understand their mindset so we can control them. That's how education came to India with the Cambridge mission. Today it's quite different. There is a lot to learn between and share between India and the world. And if the world does not understand India, they will not be able to do business. And that's 1.5 billion people who will remain outside the much needed global trade. And we know that global trade, even as we speak today, which is being beaten up on by people like Trump, etc., that's just an aberration. Trade is what allows ideas to flow. It's on the back of the ships going to explore and find copper that you had ideas of mathematics and science flow from the east through Arabia into the Levant and through the Mediterranean into the smaller islands. So all of this needs to go together. It's not one or the other. It's not trade or education or the creative sector. It's all of this. And then finally, it's not about the divide anymore between arts and sciences. That divide needs to go. Till the 18th century, there wasn't this divide. Today, we're sort of, people like us, oh, you're an artsy person, bugger off, go and do whatever else because you can't do math. I got 4% in math. But today, I sit on a math board because it is vital to understand science, technology, and math to make possible what you think, or using your arts brain. Innovate, because the future is about innovation. The future is about the coming together of the arts and the sciences, and the creative economies is the sunshine sector.
Thank you, Sanjoy. I'm going to have to open it up to questions now because you've only got 10 minutes. It's flown by so quickly. Who thought talking about education synergies could be so interesting? A lady at the front's got a question.
Yeah, we do have enough time for questions.
We do?
20 minutes, yeah.
Oh, we have 20 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll
Oh,
give us 10 minutes to.
okay, let's, fine. If you could hold on for a few more minutes, we will get to you
Can
in a
I just
second.
give you the live example of what Sanjoy's just said? What I agree every single word. Our School of Arts and Creative Technologies was set up, I don't know, about 15 years ago as theatre, film, television. It was a bunch of engineers, it was a bunch of sociologists, it was people from our English department, it was people from all kinds of areas of our university who were really interested in doing something different. And then we saw an even bigger need where we incorporated our music department, who are a very interesting music department because they are essentially a hybrid between a conservatoire and an academic music department with a really high focus on back-end production and acoustic engineering as much as front-end performance. And that ability to create that synergistic environment where all of those people are literally falling over one another to do amazing things that respond to the really rapidly technologically enabled but still human-centered creative industries. Ultimately, what this is about is telling stories. And the other live example, and taking my inspiration from JLF very much, when we set up the Festival of Ideas in New York in 2011, our red line was to make it free, because one of the things that really concerns me is the kind of the vibe of higher education institutions being remote from the communities in which they reside, being exclusionary and elitist. And that was the year before tuition fees were trebled in the UK. And I thought this might get worse, and I don't think I was wrong. And it's absolutely critical that universities engage with local and global communities to disseminate the value and the impact and the sheer daily relevance of what we do in the research environment. It makes such a difference when you tell a story about what you do and why it should matter to people.
So I'm from a working class background, a coal mining village in Ayrshire. I got to university because I got a grant to go. Otherwise, I would never have been able to get there. And I was the only person from my family that got to university, so I was very privileged to enjoy that. I then also got to go on an exchange programme, which again was funded by my university. And I managed to have a year in California, actually, during that time. And it was so important to me. 90% of what I learned had nothing to do with education. I was an artist, and I still am, and a sculptress. And during that time, I did maximum amount of art classes and minimum amount of science classes, which was what I was supposed to be doing at university. And managed to sort of bum out from a first class degree to a 2-2 because the credit transfer didn't work between the universities, and they didn't recognise the art classes. But that was a really rich and important thing for me. And what it's done for me, coming from that background, is exactly what Joan is saying. University education is for everybody. It has to be accessible for everybody. The things, the skills that you learn at university, the things that you can take away from that have a massive impact, not just for yourself, but for your community, your family, and the people around you. So at the moment, we've just won a bid for the High Street Fund, the Thriving High Street Fund in York, which is a university project we're working with in the arts and creative technologies. And we're teaching underprivileged kids how to use augmented reality, how to create artwork, and how to produce a piece of artwork for the city in a place called Walmgate, where 38% of the kids are at poverty level. So for us, the University of Public Good thing is really important, you know, bringing education to everyone, being able to go into communities and teach them these skills that we have the ability to do from university is really, really important. And so, yeah, that price point is really important, and accessibility for everybody to be able to get that education is absolutely crucial.
Thank you. That's a really useful and interesting point. I think as we wrap this up in the next 5 minutes or so, I'd like to get your thoughts, all of you, on making sure this is equitable, because I think that's what we're all talking about. Everybody on the panel seems to agree this is a great idea, but how do we ensure that everyone across the social strata gets access to this sort of thing? I'm going to start with you again, Joan, and then we will come to you next, Sanam, because what's the price point? Let's just be open about it. If you want to study in 26, 27, how much money do we need to be able to enrol on that?
So it's not quite set yet. I'm not being evasive. There's still some regulatory stuff that we're working through on that, but we will know very soon. But what I will say is that we will be looking at scholarship funding in the same way as we do at the University of York. We were one of the first universities to take really seriously the idea of financial hardship and building scholarship philanthropy. And I would expect us to be doing a very similar approach, where we would look at least a proportion of people coming in on various bursary schemes of one kind or another. But this has been moving at speed in the last 4 months, and there's still a bit of detail to work out. But we do take really seriously the idea of shaping our ability to provide services and the out-of-classroom activities and the support to enable people who've come from backgrounds who don't have the useful aunt working in an industry to give them the leg up and the internship that isn't paid, etc., etc. So there's a long track record, and I think what we're doing is working with our India partners to establish a similar mode of ethos of that equitable piece. And there's more to come on this, and there'll be a lot more on the website in the coming months.
Sanam, what more can Indian businesses, institutions also do to help this? Because to be blunt, anyone I've known who studied overseas, who's gone to an institution like INSEAD or Oxford or Cambridge, I mean, they are in a social strata and a wealth strata that I can't even imagine sometimes. It's Delhi's richest that tend to go to the most prestigious universities. How can India also make it more accessible? What can the government do and other institutions?
In fact, I was just thinking of the role of government, the role of society, civil society and businesses in joining hands with universities like York and Indian partners in order to bring that equity to the table. Because let's be honest, there's no dearth of money in India. India's a really rich country when you look around things that are going on and, cash flow for a lot of individuals. And I think the culture of philanthropy, the culture of giving back and redirecting that funding into genuine capacity building and education is something we need to enable more of. And I think Indian government, extending those budgets into education, I think, at the national level, at the federal level, at the state level, it's a concurrent subject, education in India. There's lots we can do there. I know there's much happening, but I think we need to do what some other parties have done in India to really make education an electoral issue. And I think if you make education an electoral issue, which people are, there is a proven practice here that electorates are responding to that positively, it might encourage more movement in that direction and in what is already a good direction of travel. The second thing is, I think, enabling students on the ground to really I think scholarships is really important, but also enabling students on the ground to be a bit wild, be a bit audacious, and be a bit creative, and empowering them to empower others is really important. And I'm not sure, and this is not an India thing, this is not a UK thing, I think we can do a lot more of that. I remember setting up Nisao, 13 years ago now, I was waiting tables at £2 an hour, £2.50 an hour in order to be able to afford international fees. I was, taking loans from here and there. I was doing all sorts of things. But I also remember, and we were talking about creative arts and math, I took Rishi Kapoor to the London School of Economics to deliver a maiden lecture there 15 odd years ago. And everyone's like, what? Rishi Kapoor at the London School of Economics? Like, what's going on? But it was because we wanted to tell a story of India. We wanted to tell the story of the creative arts and how important they are and how they are, creative arts are such a living bridge between both countries. I bring that up because I remember being a first or second year undergrad student at uni who was waiting tables part-time because, socioeconomically I wasn't the Delhi's rich and richest kid coming through. But my university at that point gave me a grant of £15,000 or something. And you had Rishi Kapoor and you had Dr. Shashi Tharoor and you had Lord Karan Villamoria and so many other countless really tall names, many of whom we've heard on this stage today, coming through and talking about the India story and encouraging students. And every one of those 500-600 students or everyone in that team that we'll pull together now felt very empowered that my university has enabled me to dream, to deliver, to be audacious, to fly in people from India when we want, for them to be able to talk. Now, of course, this is all very common. I say this because the same audacity we took when we said, okay, well, we are seeing what's happening around right now. Joan, you alluded to it in terms of international students being seen as immigrants worldwide, here, in the US, elsewhere. And we thought, you know what, we need to be able to tell their story better. It was universities like York who enabled us to now run what I would say is the most prestigious global recognition for an Indian who has studied in the UK. We're taking the stories of people like, we've heard of Adar Poonawalla, enabling, producing 70% of the world's vaccines. But not many of us would know that he studied at the University of Westminster and that journey and how that has contributed to public good in the UK. So the reason I'm bringing up some of these examples is in a twisted way to say that if we can enable an environment for our students here, our students there, empowering them with some cash. There are programs, for example, in government schools in India where they're getting in years 8 and 9 seed funding to do their own entrepreneurial projects. We could do that here. That's something we can learn here. I think we need to empower and trust students with not just the frameworks and the systems, but also sometimes cash for them to dream big and to enable things. And at that price point thing, I will just make one small comment also to say, we have done market research for a university that wanted at NISAU to open shop in India. What we found, and Joan, this may be interesting, you may have found the same, in India there's every price point will sell. There is a market for every price point because it is such a large country with such a vast socioeconomic diversity. But my request to universities like York would be, and I might not be very popular for saying this, but it would be not to compromise on your standards and your quality because you wanted to achieve a particular price point. And it may be getting government in and corporates in to support you on that. But I and hundreds of thousands of others are the benefactors of most amazing outcomes that can happen when you bring Indian foundation with British pedagogy. And I think we don't want to compromise on that at all.
I completely agree on the quality.
Just going to move around to Heather and Sanjoy because then we do have to open it to questions. So just some final thoughts on that point about equity from you as well.
Just before I do that, can I just add a little bit to what you just said there in terms of that enterprise, allowing people to have that creativity and innovation. So we have a scheme, proof of concept scheme that any student can go for where they can test an idea out if they think it's got legs. Summer Accelerator program, which any student in the summer can actually spend 3 months developing a business idea to see if it's got legs, and they get paid a grant and they get coached as part of that process. And then a year in enterprise program, which would be great to see in Mumbai, which is where a student at the end of their degree gets an extra year to basically learn how to develop a business, to set their business up, to test it, to be coached and to be paid, and to get an accreditation with a year in enterprise at the end of their degree program. So for that, so you're leaving university ready to start a business or already running a business, and I'm one of the coaches on that, and we've got a young kid who's just moved into the science park now. He's got his work patented, he's won an Innovate UK award to create educational systems that enable young people to learn electronics, so a completely new set of skills for the younger generation. So there's something around equity as well in terms of enabling the students that exist in the university now to then empower the next generation as well, and to enable them to develop those entrepreneurial skills and to encourage them to be able to go into self-employment as well as getting a job and having those employment.
I mean, that takes us nicely to something I just wanted to ask Sanjoy about, in addition to what you want to say as well. But imagine if something like that was taken to Dharavi, somewhere like that in Mumbai.
Education in India is big business. So it disguises itself partly as land grab sometimes, and that's true. But it's also huge business, and every business house in India today is involved in education. You get lots of acres of land at discounted price, and you can build this. And every education institute today has paid back its loans in many ways. So it's established as a business. But can you move beyond that? I think the issue here, for example, if you look at Ashoka University, which in a very short period of time as a liberal arts institution was able to find its place in the sun, but today it's wrestling with, can it allow its students to say things that are not acceptable? And I think one of the issues here that we have to look at, Joan, is not so much about what you're teaching, but are we teaching or are we providing a platform for young people or not so young people to question? Are we providing a platform to innovate? Are we providing a platform to create different opportunities? And you see the hunger today to be able to do that. There's not enough platforms because a lot of the places have to be fairly, they have to walk a very tight line. It's not that Ashoka University was at fault in anything that it did. It's just that the reality of the situation is that it had to walk a very, very tight line and understand what the balance is in trying to ensure freedom in the way that we represent freedom, but also provide the best kind of education. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges for any international organization or university coming in, is how do you find that? How do you negotiate spaces like India, which are so complex? India lives in many centuries at the same time. We also live in many realities at the same time. Caste, religion, economic activity, etc. It's like you said, at every different economic strata, there's a price point that will work. But going back to what Joan said, can we look at excellence in the sense of, can excellence then be used to leverage scientific adventure, scientific knowledge, research? That will define how you look at this university system and education system into the future. And then it's irrelevant whether you get a 90% scholarship or 100% scholarship, because you know that that's what is going to fuel the future of India and education.
Okay, thank you, Sanjoy, and the rest of the panel. And I think what Sanjoy touched on is some of the challenges that is going on in the US at the moment with the government and institutions there, which is an entire other hour.
It's called a shit show, but yeah.
On that note, let's go to questions. This lady here and the gentleman, the first two who raised their hands earlier. Just tell us your name, and we've got a mic for you.
My name is Meher. I'm from Pakistan, not from India.
Meher, just take the mic, please.
Right.
Mic.
Oh, sorry. So yes, I know it's Jaipur Literary Fest where I do come, and I've been listening to India, UK, India trade. I know about that, and I've been feeling very, very jealous about my people back home that, York is going to India, not to Pakistan. And I was thinking, how the hell do we do this now? Our government is probably not going to be terribly helpful at this point in time because of our economic situation. But Sanam has answered my questions subsequently by telling everybody around that this is what they were doing. So maybe those are the messages we need to take back home. And like your mom, I'm also from a doctor from Pakistan, and I also had to do the PLAB again, as well as an English exam again, oral, written, to prove that, yes, I can put my point of view across. So yes, we do face a lot of these difficulties, and our younger lot, they cannot afford it. And they are such brilliant people.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing things online. And even there, they get crushed.
Okay, thank you, Meher.
Yes.
We just got to get the other gentleman's question so we can take two and answer because we're running out of time.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Meher.
So I'm Sanjoy Sen, Sanjoy's namesake, but management consultant turned academic, and I have two questions. One is about brand. So, the old model that you rightly spoke about, where universities from the UK setting up campus elsewhere used to send their own academics, that was driven by the need to protect the brand. And therefore, my question to you is, if you're challenging that model, how do you ensure that this is not seen as another Mumbai university with a UK rubber stamp? So that's the first question. Second one, lots of discussion on entrepreneurship, overlaying creativity, digital strategies, medical areas, etc. But given my experience of how UK universities work, that needs to be embedded in a school, whether that's the business school or a school of engineering or the medical school. So the second question is, how do you embed a softer attribute like entrepreneurism? Do you embed it in a school or do you embed it in all the schools in different ways?
Thank you.
Two
So
questions.
let's start with Meher's question, which is... Oh, should we get three questions? Yeah.
So yeah, I thought, Sanjoy, your points were extremely interesting, both about universities and land grab, and about the way in which freedom and the ability of academic freedom is going to work. And that's going to have huge repercussions for the University of York. And I wondered how you were thinking of managing that. I've got students in prison at the moment in India who work with British universities for speaking out in various forums. So I just wondered how you're going to manage that. I myself teach in a British university. So I wondered how you're going to manage, and also why sustainability is not in your curriculum. I notice AI, I notice computer science, I notice business. So you're going to be building a campus, right? So Gift City and Gurgaon are now sites of a lot of British universities are fighting over those campuses. And they've got huge water problems, right? So it's not just an issue of sustainability for campuses, but also sustainability as part of the curriculum. So those two issues, academic freedom and sustainability.
Okay, we've got quite a lot of questions, so we might have to break up who answers what. Let's just start with Meher's question. Why not Pakistan?
So straightforwardly, we have more longer-term research partnerships that we've been building up over a number of years in India than we do in Pakistan. So it's a very practical thing of who do we know really well, because I don't really believe in helicoptering in all of a sudden. I think this has to build on sustainable, trusted relationships. So I guess I can't really comment in detail on the Pakistani government's approach to this, but I think there's always a version of starting small. So I think a lot of the established models of articulation agreements where students might study for a couple of years in India and then come to a UK university, we are building the next wave of what, I don't know how many people know about the notion of transnational education, but the idea of effectively partial education in one country and partial education in another. This is really responding to a massive capacity issue that the Indian government and individual state governments have recognised, and they've recognised they cannot do this alone, has led to the adjustment of new economic policy. So I think there are opportunities for bilateral relationships. We have got students from Pakistan. We just don't have the depth and breadth of research alliances with Pakistan that we do with India. Can I address the lady's question on sustainability? So I should have hammered home, because I am so up to my elbows in a massive program called Bio Yorkshire, which is built around engineering biology, which is entirely about environmental sustainability, and it is entirely about the teaching and the research that will lead us to be able to defossilize large-scale heavy industries and their over-reliance on fossil fuels. So all of our teaching is shaped around a massive program of moving into bio-based materials, biofuels, biomedicines, a huge partnership that we have had for many years with Sun Pharmaceuticals is shaped around our extreme expertise in plant science, where the genetic activity that we have managed to extract large-scale noscapine from field trials in a number of countries, including India, from poppy plants, has led to a mass industrialization of 1.6 billion doses since the early 2011 onwards, working with Sun Pharma that has made an enormous difference. So it's just one example.
Okay, could you just also answer the land grab thing? Because I thought that was quite interesting. I mean, you're talking about not having a physical one big space anyway.
So we will be in the initial phases, we will be renting space in Mumbai that is already in existence. If we move to a model where we join forces in terms of other physical developments, we would very much be using our School of Architecture, our environmental sustainability research to support the development of an environmentally sustainable campus. We're doing that. We are the first university who are doing deep geothermal engineering, literally with DESNES, I forget what DESNES, it's effectively the government department in charge of tackling climate change. That is a huge program of work that we're developing here in York, but equally the kind of activity that we would expect to be doing if we were developing a physical campus. But in order to get up and running as fast as possible, we are simply using spaces that are already in existence. But the teaching of environmental sustainability is huge for us. We have a student-led sustainability clinic offering their services to help small and local organisations around sustainability. Again, we would expect to be encouraging our students in Mumbai to do the same.
Lots of sustainability there then. I'm sorry to the rest of the panel, but it feels like the question from Sanjoy is also one for Joan to answer, which is about the brand and how, I mean, Sanam might have thoughts on it too, but how you can keep that brand.
So this is a joint venture. So we are going to be recruiting on a global basis, but all of the developments, and this is a big part of why we were so encouraged by the new economic policy adjustment about foreign overseas institutions, is that what you offer in York is what you offer in Mumbai. So it follows all of the regulatory practices, and the brand visibility and the brand adherence is therefore part of how, it's baked into the way in which the joint venture will work.
Just to add to the other bit of your question around the entrepreneurialism part, so we're really absolutely dedicated in giving every single student an ability to have an entrepreneurial mindset and to be able to engage with entrepreneurialism and innovation. I run myself a postgraduate course called Business and Innovation in Digital Enterprise, which is open to any postgraduate student in the university as an elective. We have the proof of concept Summer Accelerator, and Year in Enterprise is open to any student at the university who wants to do that. And we're also looking to develop what's called a MOOC, which is a massive online course, which would be open to anybody actually for free that wanted to learn about entrepreneurialism and innovation. So that would be open to anybody in the world who wanted to learn. So that's something that we're actually talking about developing just now.
And that's what Water has done, the MOOC.
Yeah.
But Sanjoy, just to sort of refer that, I don't think there's a, look at Priyank is sitting there. He's part of the business school. He's the dean of the business school in Ashoka University. Also teaches at Cambridge and is doing a book, I think, on entrepreneurship. But entrepreneurship is not something that needs to sit in A or B department, be it in business development. Entrepreneurship, aesthetics, design is stuff that we need to teach every kid from when they're, kiddie and happy to learn. And the problem is that we don't do that. The problem is that we then put it into this silo of, if you want to be an entrepreneur, go off to Harvard or go to business school, which is a bunch of nonsense. I mean, business schools, and with due apology to Priyank and to you, Sanjoy, business schools teach you about business, doesn't necessarily teach you about innovation and entrepreneurship. And that's where we need the creative economy people.
Yes.
And that's why you need integrated departments, not silo-driven departments. Because even in environment, today, if you have innovation, it comes from environment. I mean, it'll help environment.
To that, I'm going to give you one really good example. When I was at the LSE, and this is now 12, 13 years ago, undergrad course, they had introduced something called LSE 100, which was no matter what you were studying, no matter what level of course, you were mandatorily, and there was an exam on this, so you would actually have to study, taught about the World War. You were taught about artificial intelligence back then. You were taught about a number of these cross-cutting things that otherwise someone who was doing a math degree, which, I just about made it, but I would have never otherwise got. It opened up my worldview entirely differently. Concepts like, skills like project management, storytelling, design, as you said, arts. I think everybody needs to learn them. There's a guy called Manjul Bhargav, this may be how we close, who won the Fields Prize for maths, which is a Nobel equivalent, of course. and he had, and because I'm not very good at math, which is the degree I did. However, he won it for an equation that for centuries had been unsolved using Sanskrit and using music, Indian classical music, and he was well recognized for it. So I think the fact that we need STEAM to be, the focus is quite important, and I hope York does that.
Sorry, going to have to make Sanam the last speaker. I know Joan wanted to get in, but thank you so much to you, Joan, to Sanam, to Heather, to Sanjoy. It was a really interesting discussion. I think you'll all agree. You all learned something from it. Thanks to the questioners as well.